March 15th, 1883. When ranch hand Cole Brennan pulled a 7-foot Apache woman from a blazing wagon on the Arizona frontier, he thought saving her life would be the end of it. But when her father, the most feared war chief in the territory, appeared at his ranch the next morning, the impossible request he made would force Cole to choose between his own survival and a debt that could never be repaid. Would you risk everything to honor a life debt to someone the entire world has declared your enemy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona territory that afternoon, turning the red clay into something that felt like the devil's own skillet. Cole Brennan wiped the sweat from his brow with a dusty sleeve, his eyes scanning the horizon as he guided his horse, Copper, along the narrow trail that connected the McKinnon Ranch to the trading post in Silver Ridge. At 28 years old, Cole had spent the better part of a decade working cattle and keeping his head down, which was exactly how a man survived out here in 1883. The territory was a powder keg, and everyone knew it. Apache raids had intensified over the past year, and the U.S. Army's response had been equally brutal. Cole tried to stay neutral in the whole mess, which earned him suspicious looks from both the townspeople who thought he was soft and the Apache scouts who watched from the ridgelines, wondering whose side he was really on. The truth was simpler than either group wanted to believe. Cole just wanted to work his modest spread of land, tend his small herd, and maybe someday have enough saved to buy the property outright from old man McKinnon. He was 3 miles from the ranch when he first saw the smoke. Black and thick, it billowed up from somewhere beyond the next ridge. The kind of smoke that came from burning wood and canvas, not sagebrush. Cole's gut tightened. Smoke like that meant trouble, and trouble out here usually meant someone was dying or already dead. Every instinct told him to turn Copper around and head back the way he'd come. Report it to the ranch hands. Let someone else deal with whatever hell was unfolding over that ridge. But Cole Brennan had never been particularly good at listening to his instincts. He urged Copper into a canter, leaning forward in the saddle as they crested the ridge. What he saw in the valley below stopped him cold. A covered wagon sat engulfed in flames, the canvas top burning like a torch against the pale blue sky. The horses that had been pulling it were gone, either fled or stolen, and the wagon itself was canted at an angle, one wheel buried in a wash where it had clearly gotten stuck. No bodies nearby, no sign of whoever had been traveling in it. Cole sat frozen for just a moment, weighing his options. The smart play was to assume this was an ambush, that Apache warriors were watching from the rocks right now, waiting to see if anyone would be foolish enough to approach. The army had been telling stories about decoy wagons for months, traps designed to lure in would-be rescuers. Then he heard it, a sound that cut through the crackling roar of the flames. A voice, deep and strained, calling out words in a language Cole didn't understand. But the desperation in the tone was universal. "Damn it," Cole muttered. Already knowing he was about to do something catastrophically stupid, he kicked Copper into a gallop down the slope, his hand instinctively checking the revolver at his hip, even though he knew a gun wouldn't do him much good against fire. As he got closer, he could see movement inside the wagon, visible through the gaps in the burning canvas. Someone was trapped inside, and from the sound of it, they were still very much alive. Cole dismounted while Copper was still moving, hitting the ground at a run. The heat from the fire hit him like a physical force, making his eyes water and his skin prickle. He circled the wagon, looking for a way that wouldn't get him killed. The back was completely engulfed. The canvas there burned away to reveal the wooden frame underneath, which was beginning to char and crack. The voice called out again. Closer now, and Cole realized it was coming from the front of the wagon. Near the driver's bench, he scrambled up onto the angled wagon tongue, using it like a ramp to get higher. The front canvas flap was still intact but smoking, seconds away from catching fire. Cole grabbed it with both hands, ignoring the heat searing through his leather gloves. and tore it aside. What he saw inside made him forget how to breathe. Woman, if you could call someone that size a woman without feeling like the word was inadequate, was pinned beneath a massive trunk that had shifted when the wagon crashed. She had to be 7 feet tall, maybe more, with broad shoulders and arms corded with muscle that most men would envy. Her skin was the deep bronze of the Apache people, and her long black hair, streaked with gray, hung loose around her face. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a long doeskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork, now torn and stained with blood. But it was her eyes that held Cole frozen. They were dark and fierce, filled with pain, but also with a kind of dignity that he'd rarely seen in anyone, let alone someone facing death by fire. She looked at him, this white cowboy who'd just torn open her prison, and said something in Apache that he didn't understand, but felt in his bones. She wasn't begging, she was commanding. "Hold on," Cole said, knowing she probably didn't understand English any better than he understood Apache. He climbed into the wagon, which swayed dangerously under his weight, combined with hers. The trunk pinning her had to weigh 200 pounds, packed full of God knew what. Under normal circumstances, Cole might have been able to move it. Might have, but these weren't normal circumstances. The fire was spreading fast, already licking at the wooden ribs of the wagon frame. The smoke was getting thicker, making each breath a struggle. And the woman herself, she had to weigh 250 pounds of solid muscle and bone. Even if he got the trunk off her, how was he supposed to get her out? The wagon lurched suddenly, settling deeper into the wash. Flames caught the edge of a blanket near the back, and within seconds it was ablaze, racing toward them like a living thing. Cole made his decision. He positioned himself at the end of the trunk, planted his feet as best he could on the tilted floor, and lifted. His back screamed in protest, muscles straining against weight that felt immovable. The trunk shifted an inch, then another. The woman, understanding what he was trying to do, began to pull herself free. Her face contorted with pain. Cole could see now that her left leg was badly injured, possibly broken, but she didn't make a sound. She grabbed the edge of the wagon's sidewall and hauled herself forward with pure arm strength. Dragging her injured leg behind her, Cole's arms were shaking, his vision starting to blur from the smoke and exertion. He couldn't hold it much longer. "Move!" he shouted, though she was already moving as fast as she could. With a final pull, she cleared the trunk. Cole let it drop immediately, the weight crashing down onto the wagon floor with enough force to crack the boards. He grabbed the woman under her arms, stunned by the solid weight of her, and together they half crawled, half fell toward the torn canvas opening. Getting out was somehow worse than getting in. The wagon was fully engulfed now, flames everywhere, heat so intense that Cole's exposed skin felt like it was blistering. He went first, tumbling out onto the wagon tongue and then to the ground, landing hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The woman followed, and Cole had just enough presence of mind to try to break her fall. Though she still hit the ground with tremendous force, they lay there for a moment, both gasping for air as the wagon continued to burn behind them. Cole's hands were burned, his clothes singed, and he was pretty sure he'd done some serious damage to his back. But they were alive. The woman pushed herself up onto her elbows, then tried to stand. Her injured leg buckled immediately, and she would have fallen if Cole hadn't caught her. Supporting someone who had at least 8 inches and 80 pounds on him was an exercise in creative engineering. But he managed to get her arm across his shoulders and take some of her weight. "We need to move," he said, knowing the smoke could be seen for miles. If this was an Apache raid, the warriors might come back. If it was something else, bandits maybe, or just bad luck, whoever had done this might still be nearby. The woman said something in Apache, her voice strained but firm. She gestured toward Copper, who stood about 30 yards away, ears pinned back and eyes rolling at the fire, but holding his ground, like the good horse he was. Getting her onto the horse was going to be interesting. They made their way slowly, the woman hopping on her good leg while leaning heavily on Cole. Up close, he could see she was older than he'd first thought, probably in her 50s. with the weathered face of someone who'd spent their whole life under the desert sun. But age hadn't diminished her strength. The muscles in her arm, pressed against his shoulders, were like iron cables. When they reached Copper, the horse snorted nervously but didn't bolt. Cole had raised him from a colt, and the horse trusted him even when every equine instinct was screaming to run from the fire. "Easy, boy," Cole murmured. He looked at the woman, then at the horse, calculating the logistics. She was too heavy for him to lift into the saddle, injured leg or not. She'd have to mount herself. The woman seemed to understand. She grabbed the saddle horn with both hands, gathered her strength, and pulled herself up with her arms alone, swinging her good leg over Copper's back. The horse sidestepped under her weight, but held steady. Her injured leg hung loose, and Cole could see blood seeping through her dress where the bone had possibly broken through the skin. Cole swung up behind her, which was awkward given that she took up most of the saddle. He had to perch on Copper's hindquarters, his arms reaching around the woman to grab the reins. "Let's go," he said, clicking his tongue. Copper, bless his patient heart, began walking, adjusting his gait to accommodate the unusual load. They headed not toward the McKinnon Ranch, but toward Cole's own small homestead, about 5 miles to the east. The ranch would have more people who could help, but it would also have more questions, more witnesses. Something about this whole situation felt delicate, like one wrong move could set off consequences Cole couldn't predict. His cabin was isolated, which seemed like the smarter choice right now. As they rode, Cole's mind raced. Who was this woman? Why was she traveling alone? And why had her wagon caught fire in the middle of nowhere? The wheels of his mind turned over possibilities. Accident, attack, deliberate targeting. None of the answers were comforting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The woman swayed in the saddle, and Cole realized she was fighting to stay conscious. Blood loss, smoke inhalation, shock, any one of those could kill her. All three together made survival a long shot. "Stay with me," Cole said, knowing she probably didn't understand. "Just stay awake. We're almost there." The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Under different circumstances, Cole might have appreciated the beauty. Right now, all he could think about was getting to his cabin before full dark, before the woman in front of him bled out, and before whoever had set that wagon on fire decided to come looking for survivors. His homestead appeared in the distance, a modest structure of adobe and wood that Cole had built with his own hands. Behind it stood a small barn, a corral and a well, everything a man needed to survive out here on the edge of civilization. It wasn't much, but it was his, or would be once he finished paying McKinnon. He guided Copper to the front of the cabin and dismounted carefully. The woman was barely conscious now, listing to one side. Cole reached up and caught her as she began to fall, her weight nearly taking him to the ground. Somehow, he managed to keep his feet and half-carried, half-dragged her toward the cabin door. Getting her inside and onto his bed took the last reserves of his strength. She collapsed onto the simple straw mattress, her injured leg stretched out at an unnatural angle. In the better light of the cabin, Cole could see the full extent of her injuries. The leg was definitely broken and badly. Burns covered her arms and parts of her face. Bruises were already forming where the trunk had pinned her. Cole stood there for a moment, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath and figure out what to do next. He wasn't a doctor. The nearest real physician was in Silver Ridge, a half-day's ride away. The woman needed help he couldn't provide, but bringing a doctor meant questions. It meant the army getting involved, probably. It meant turning this woman over to authorities who might see her as an enemy before they saw her as a patient. The woman's eyes opened, fixing on him with surprising clarity. She said something in Apache, a long string of words that carried the weight of importance. Then she reached out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, pulling him closer. Her grip was like a vice, and Cole understood that even injured, even half-dead, this woman was formidable. She spoke again, more slowly this time, as if trying to make him understand through sheer force of will. when he just stared at her blankly. She released his wrist and pointed to her chest, then to him, then made a gesture that seemed to encompass everything: the cabin, the desert outside, the world. Cole thought he understood. A debt. She was acknowledging a debt. "It's okay," he said softly. "Just rest. We'll figure this out." But even as he said it, he had the sinking feeling that nothing about this situation was going to be okay. He'd saved an Apache woman's life in the middle of a territory at war. The army shot Apache on sight these days, and they weren't much kinder to anyone who helped them. As Cole set about gathering supplies to treat her injuries, water, clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting, he couldn't shake the feeling that pulling this woman from that burning wagon had just changed the course of his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Outside, the desert twilight deepened toward night, and somewhere out there, someone knew that an Apache woman had been in that wagon. Someone who might come looking to finish what they'd started. Cole checked his revolver, made sure his rifle was loaded and within reach, and began the grim work of trying to save the life of a woman whose name he didn't even know. The woman's leg was worse than Cole had initially thought. By the flickering light of 3 oil lamps positioned around his bed, he could see the bone pressing against the skin, a white shadow beneath the bruised and swollen flesh. Setting a break like this required skill he didn't possess, but leaving it meant infection, gangrene, and certain death. Cole poured whiskey over his hands, then over the wound itself. The woman's jaw clenched, but she didn't cry out. Her eyes, fixed on the ceiling beams of his cabin, remained focused and alert, despite what must have been excruciating pain. He'd seen grown men pass out from injuries half this severe. "This is going to hurt," Cole said, knowing the words meant nothing to her, but needing to say them anyway. He positioned his hands on either side of the break, feeling for the displaced bone beneath the swollen tissue. The woman's hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of his blanket. She nodded once, a clear signal that she understood what was coming and was ready. Cole pulled. The sound of the bone grinding back into place made his stomach turn. But he kept his hand steady, feeling for the alignment, making sure the pieces fit together properly. The woman's entire body went rigid, every muscle locked tight, but still she made no sound. Sweat broke out across her forehead, running down her temples in rivulets. When Cole was satisfied that the bone was as close to proper position as he could manage, he began the work of splinting. He'd broken enough bones in his own years of ranch work to know the basics. Using 2 straight pieces of wood from his kindling pile and strips torn from an old shirt, he immobilized the leg as best he could. The woman finally released the blanket, leaving deep impressions where her fingers had gripped. She spoke again in Apache, several sentences that carried the rhythm of gratitude, though Cole could only guess at the actual meaning. "Save your strength," he said, dipping a cloth in cool water and pressing it to her forehead. Her fever was already starting to rise, her skin hot to the touch. The burns on her arms needed attention next. He spent the next hour cleaning and dressing the burns with a salve made from aloe and beeswax that he'd traded for at the post. The woman watched him work, her dark eyes tracking his movements with an intensity that made Cole self-conscious. He wasn't used to being studied so carefully. When he finally finished and stepped back, exhausted, the woman reached out and touched his hand. She held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the moon visible through the cabin's single window, 3/4 full. Then she made a gesture that looked like writing, followed by pointing east. Cole frowned, trying to parse the meaning. 3 days? Someone was coming in 3 days? From the east? The woman nodded as if reading his confusion, and repeated the gestures more slowly. Then she placed her hand over her heart and said a single word: Nantan, chief. Even Cole's limited exposure to Apache language included that word. A chief was coming, his blood ran cold. "Your husband?" But the woman shook her head. She pointed to herself, then made a gesture that could have meant family, kinship. Then she pointed east again and repeated, Nantan, her father. Her chief was her father, and he was coming. "Well, that's just perfect," Cole muttered, running a hand through his hair. He'd saved the daughter of an Apache chief. If the army found out, they'd hang him as a traitor. If the local ranchers found out, they'd shoot him themselves and save the army the trouble. And if this chief arrived expecting trouble, the woman seemed to sense his distress. She spoke again, longer this time, her tone almost soothing. When she finished, she made a gesture that looked like peace, patting the air with both hands. "Peace," Cole repeated. "You're saying he'll come in peace?" She nodded, then shrugged, a gesture so human and universal that despite everything, Cole almost smiled. She was saying she hoped for peace but couldn't guarantee it. Great. Wonderful. Cole walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. The desert at night was full of sounds. Coyotes in the distance, the wind rustling through the scrub brush, the creak of his barn door that he kept meaning to oil. Any one of those sounds could be masking the approach of Apache warriors, or army scouts, or bandits looking for easy targets. He turned back to find the woman struggling to sit up. "Whoa, hold on," Cole said, moving quickly to her side. "You need to rest," but she was insistent, pushing against his restraining hands. She pointed to her mouth, then made a drinking gesture. Water, of course. Cole fetched his canteen and helped her drink, supporting her head. She drank deeply, water running down her chin, and when she finished, she looked at him with something approaching approval. She patted the bed beside her and gestured for him to sit. When he hesitated, she did it again, more forcefully. Cole sat gingerly on the edge of his own bed, unsure what was happening. The woman placed her hand over her heart and said slowly, "Desba." Her name. She was telling him her name. "Desba," Cole repeated, trying to match her pronunciation. "I'm Cole Brennan." "Cole," she said, the E sound not quite translating. "Cole Brennan. Close enough." Desba pointed to the burns on Cole's hands, which he'd been ignoring in favor of treating her more serious injuries. She reached for the salve he'd been using and gestured for him to give her his hand. "I'm fine," Cole protested, but Desba was already grabbing his wrist with her good hand and pulling it toward her. For an injured woman with a broken leg and severe burns, she had a remarkable amount of determination. She applied the salve to his burns with surprising gentleness, her large, calloused hands moving carefully over his blistered skin. As she worked, she spoke softly in Apache, and though Cole didn't understand the words, the tone was clear. She was talking to distract him from the pain, the same way he might gentle a spooked horse. When she finished with one hand and moved to the other, Cole found himself studying her face more closely. The lines around her eyes and mouth spoke of a life lived hard, but with laughter mixed in. There was a scar along her jawline, old and faded, and another across her left forearm. This was a woman who'd survived things, who'd fought and endured. "What were you doing out there alone?" Cole asked, not expecting an answer, but needing to voice the question. "Where were you going?" Desba finished treating his second hand and looked at him for a long moment. Then she pointed west toward the setting sun and made a gesture like closing something. Her face held deep sadness. West. The reservations were west. Was she trying to reach one? Or had she been forced to leave one? Before Cole could puzzle it out further, Desba's eyes suddenly focused on something behind him. Her entire body tensed, and her hand shot out to grab his arm in warning. Cole spun around to see a shadow pass across the window. He moved fast, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall and moving to the side of the window where he could see out without being directly visible. His heart hammered in his chest as he scanned the darkness outside. Nothing, just the endless expanse of desert under moonlight. Then he saw it. Movement by the corral. A figure, low to the ground, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who knew how to approach undetected. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. Friend or foe? The former was unlikely this time of night. Nobody visited after dark, unless they had bad intentions or a desperate need. The figure stood up slowly, hands raised to show they were empty. In the moonlight, Cole could make out the silhouette of a man, lean and tall, wearing traditional Apache clothing. Hell, Cole breathed. The chief had arrived early. Or this was a scout, sent ahead to verify Desba's location. Behind him, Desba said something urgent in Apache. When Cole glanced back, she was gesturing toward the door, making a welcoming motion despite her injuries. "You want me to let him in?" She nodded emphatically. Every instinct Cole had screamed that this was a terrible idea. But he'd already committed to this path when he pulled Desba from that burning wagon. Might as well see it through. He went to the door, rifle still in hand, but pointed at the ground. He called out in the small amount of Apache he knew, words he'd picked up from trading post conversations. "Come!" The figure approached slowly, hands still raised. As he drew closer to the lamplight spilling from the doorway, Cole could see he was young, maybe 20, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a knife at his belt, but no other visible weapons. The young man spoke in heavily accented English. "I am Key. I come for Desba. She's inside. She's hurt pretty bad." Key's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "I see her." Cole stepped aside, keeping the rifle ready but not threatening. Key entered the cabin, his movements fluid and cautious, like a wolf entering unfamiliar territory. When Key saw Desba on the bed, his face transformed. He rushed to her side, dropping to his knees and speaking rapidly in Apache. Desba responded, her voice weak but steady, and placed a hand on his head in a gesture that was clearly affectionate. Her son, Cole realized. This was her son. The conversation between them went on for several minutes, Desba apparently explaining what had happened while Key listened intently. Occasionally, he glanced at Cole, his expression unreadable. Finally, Key stood and faced Cole directly. "You saved my mother's life. She was burning. Anyone would have done the same." "No." Key shook his head firmly. "Not anyone. Most white men, they see a Apache woman, they shoot. Or they ride away. You risk your life. This debt is sacred." Cole shifted uncomfortably. "She doesn't owe me anything. I just did what was right." Key and Desba exchanged a look, and Desba said something that made Key's expression grow serious. He turned back to Cole. "My grandfather, he come tomorrow. At dawn, he must see you." "Your grandfather?" "The chief? Yes, Nantan Victorio. He will want to speak with you about what you do today." Cole's stomach dropped. Victorio. He'd heard that name before, spoken in hushed tones at the trading post. One of the most respected and feared Apache chiefs still fighting against forced relocation. A man who'd led warriors in dozens of raids, who'd outmaneuvered army patrols for years. "Look," Cole said carefully, "I don't want any trouble. I helped your mother because she needed help. That's all. No debts, no obligations." Key translated this for Desba, who responded with a long speech that left Key looking troubled. He turned back to Cole. "My mother, she says you do not understand the Apache way. When you save life, there is always debt, always an obligation. This is the sacred law of our people. My grandfather, he will honor this debt. But he will also ask something of you." "Ask what?" "I do not know, but it will be something important. Something only you can do." Cole felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "What if I refuse?" Key's expression hardened. "Then you dishonor my mother and my grandfather. You make the gift of life meaningless. This would be a great insult. And if I accept, then you become part of our people. Not Apache, but connected, bound by honor and debt. Your life and our lives, they become tied together." Cole looked at Desba, who watched him with those dark, intense eyes. She said something else in Apache, and Key translated. She says, "You are good man." She sees it. She says, "My grandfather will see it too." She says, "Do not be afraid." "I'm not afraid," Cole lied. "I just don't know what I'm getting into." "None of us know that," Key said with a slight smile. "That is life." Desba spoke again, sounding weaker now. Key's expression grew concerned. "She needs rest. I will stay here tonight. Guard her. You should rest too. Tomorrow, when my grandfather comes, you will need your strength." Cole wanted to argue, to say this was his cabin and he'd decide who stayed, but the look on Key's face stopped him. This young man would kill or die to protect his mother. Making an issue of it would only create conflict neither of them needed. "I'll take the floor," Cole said. "You can have the chair." As Cole spread a blanket on the hard-packed earth floor of his cabin, he listened to Key and Desba speaking softly in Apache. Outside, the desert night continued its ancient rhythms, uncaring about the strange alliance forming within these adobe walls. Cole stared at the ceiling beams, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. Tomorrow, an Apache war chief would arrive at his homestead. Tomorrow, Cole would learn what impossible request awaited him. Tomorrow, his life as a simple ranch hand trying to stay neutral would end, one way or another. He thought about riding away before dawn, disappearing into the territory and letting Key deal with his mother's recovery. But even as the thought formed, Cole knew he wouldn't do it. He'd never run from anything in his life, and he wasn't about to start now. Besides, there was something about Desba, her quiet strength, her dignity in suffering, the way she'd commanded respect even while pinned beneath a burning wagon, that made Cole want to see this through. Whatever came next, whatever this debt demanded, he'd face it. The hours crept toward dawn, and Cole finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, his rifle within arm's reach, and the sound of Desba's labored breathing mixing with the desert wind outside. Tomorrow would bring answers and consequences. Dawn broke over the Arizona territory with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the horizon look sharp enough to cut yourself on. Cole woke to find Key already standing at the window, his body language alert and tense. Desba slept fitfully on the bed, her fever having broken sometime during the night, leaving her damp with sweat, but breathing easier. "They're here," Key said without turning around. 2 miles out, maybe less. Cole pushed himself up from the floor, his back protesting after a night on the hard ground. He joined Key at the window and looked out across the desert. At first, he saw nothing, just the familiar landscape painted in shades of rose and gold by the rising sun. Then his eyes adjusted, and he picked out the movement. Riders. At least a dozen of them, approaching in a loose formation that looked casual but probably wasn't. "That's a lot of warriors for a peaceful visit," Cole observed, trying to keep his voice steady. "My grandfather does not travel alone. Too many enemies. White soldiers, Mexican soldiers, other tribes who made peace with the white man." Key finally turned to look at Cole. "You should know something." "What happened to my mother? It was not an accident." Cole felt his gut tighten. "What do you mean?" "The wagon, someone cut the wheel hub nearly through. When it hit the wash, it was supposed to break. Trap her inside. And the fire? Oil poured under the canvas. All they needed was one spark." Key's expression was grim. "Someone wanted my mother dead. Wanted it to look like an accident or Apache carelessness. Who would want that?" Key was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "My mother, she is more than just the chief's daughter. She is a peace talker. She speaks for our people with the white men who still listen. Not many of them left, but some. She was traveling to meet with an Indian agent, a man who promised to help stop the forced removal to San Carlos Reservation." San Carlos. Cole knew about that place, a barren wasteland where the government was trying to shove every Apache band they could catch, regardless of traditional territories or tribal relationships. It was a slow death sentence, and everyone knew it. So someone didn't want her reaching this agent. Yes, could be army officers who want war, not peace. Could be ranchers who want our land. Could be suppliers who make money from the reservation system. Key's jaw clenched. Could be Apache who think peace talk is betrayal. Many enemies. Hard to know which one did this. Before Cole could respond, Desba stirred on the bed. She said something in Apache, and Key immediately went to her side, speaking softly. She replied, trying to sit up, and Key helped her, propping her up with Cole's pillows. Desba looked at Cole and spoke, her voice hoarse but determined. Key translated, "She says you must understand. What my grandfather will ask, it is not a simple thing. It is dangerous. But it is only a chance. Only chance for what?" Another exchange in Apache. Then Key said, "Only chance to stop more killing. To maybe save our people from San Carlos. To find who tried to murder my mother before they try again." Cole walked to his water bucket and splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear his head. Through the window, the riders were close enough now that he could make out individual figures. One rode at the front, and even from a distance, there was something about his bearing that marked him as the leader. "How long do I have before they get here?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. "Then I need coffee." "You want some?" Key looked surprised by the question, then almost smiled. "Yes, coffee is good." Cole busied himself with his small stove, coaxing the coals to life and setting his battered coffee pot to boil. The familiar routine helped calm his nerves. As he worked, he was intensely aware of Desba watching him and of the approaching warriors outside. "Tell me about your grandfather," Cole said as he measured out coffee grounds. "What kind of man is he?" Key considered this. "He is hard but fair. He has fought the white man for many years, but he is not blind to reality. He knows our people cannot win this war. Too many white men, too many soldiers. But he will not let our people be destroyed. He looks for a third path, not surrender, not endless war, but survival with honor." Key paused. "My mother is his heart. She is his only child who lived past childhood. The others died from white man's diseases. Smallpox, cholera. 5 children were gone before they could walk. The weight of that loss hung in the air." Cole poured 3 cups of coffee, bringing one to Key and one to Desba, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. He kept the third for himself, wrapping his burned hands around its warmth. They drank in silence as the sun climbed higher and the riders drew closer. Cole could see them clearly now. Apache warriors mounted on horses that looked like they could run forever. They wore a mix of traditional clothing and items taken or traded from white settlements. Most carried rifles, and all of them moved with the easy confidence of men who'd spent their entire lives in the saddle. The man at the front sat tall on a paint horse, his long grey hair hanging loose past his shoulders. He wore a red cloth band around his head and a vest decorated with silver conchos that caught the morning light. Even from a distance, his face was striking, all sharp angles and deep-set eyes that seemed to take in everything. Nantan Victorio. "He's here," Key said unnecessarily. The warriors stopped about 50 yards from Cole's cabin, forming a loose semicircle. Only Victorio continued forward, his horse walking at a measured pace that somehow felt more threatening than a charge would have been. He stopped 10 feet from the door and sat motionless, waiting. Cole understood. This was his cabin, his territory. Protocol demanded he make the first move. He drained the last of his coffee, set down the cup, and walked to the door. His rifle was leaning against the wall, but he deliberately left it there. Whatever happened next, starting it with a weapon in his hands, seemed like a poor choice. He opened the door and stepped outside into the cool morning air. Face to face with Victorio, Cole understood why the army hadn't been able to capture this man. His eyes held the kind of intelligence that missed nothing. Every detail of Cole's appearance, every weapon visible in the cabin behind him, every advantage and disadvantage of the terrain around them. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Victorio dismounted with fluid grace that belied his age. He had to be at least 60, and approached within conversational distance. Up close, Cole could see the scars that marked him, the lines etched deep by sun and wind and years of survival. Victorio spoke in Apache, his voice deep and resonant. From inside the cabin, Key called out a translation. "He says he comes in peace to thank the man who saved his daughter's life. He says he owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid, but he will try." Cole cleared his throat. "Tell him I'm honored by his visit. Tell him his daughter is a brave woman who survived what would have killed most people. Tell him I only did what any decent person would do." He translated, and something that might have been respect flickered across Victorio's face. He replied, and Key called out, "He says modesty is good quality in young man, but you do not understand what you have done. You have saved not just one life, but hope for many lives. He says he must ask something of you, something that will be difficult and dangerous. He wishes there was another way, but there is not. Here it comes," Cole thought. The impossible request. What does he need? Victorio spoke for longer this time, his words measured and careful. Key's translation came in pieces. "Someone tried to kill my mother. Someone who knew her route, knew her mission, knew exactly where to strike. This means someone close to peace talks is a traitor. Could be in an Indian agency, could be among chiefs who meet with white men, could be in the army. Victorio paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of difficult decisions made. We cannot investigate. If Apaches start asking questions, especially questions about white men, it brings soldiers, it brings war. It destroys everything my daughter works for. But you are white man. You are a ranch hand who minds own business. Nobody suspects you. Nobody watches you. Cole felt understanding dawn cold and heavy. You want me to find out who tried to kill Desba? Yes, Key translated. He wants you to go to Silver Ridge, to a trading post, to an Indian agency. Listen to talk. Watch people. Find who hates peace enough to kill for it. Find who benefits from war with Apache. And if I find them... Victorio's response was simple and chilling. Then you tell me. I handle rest. Cole ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps away and then back. You're asking me to become a spy, to investigate people in my own community. If they figure out what I'm doing, they'll kill me. If the army finds out I'm working with Apache, they'll hang me as a traitor. Yes, Key translated Victorio's response. This is why it is an impossible request. Why can no one else do it? Why must it be you? There has to be another way. Victorio spoke again, and this time his words carried sadness. My daughter will try again. When she heals, she will go back to peace talks because it is her purpose, her calling. And whoever tried to kill her will try again. Next time maybe they will succeed. After her, they will target others who speak for peace. Soon no one left but war leaders on both sides. Then comes the end. My people are destroyed or locked away at San Carlos, dying slowly of disease and despair. Key appeared in the doorway, supporting Desba, who'd insisted on standing despite her injuries. She looked directly at Cole and spoke, her voice weak but clear. He translated, she says she does not ask this for herself. She asks for children who will grow up in peace, or not grow up at all. She asks for mothers who will not bury sons killed in raids. She asks for a future that is not just blood and death. Cole looked at the three of them, Desba, battered but unbowed, Key, young but already hardened by war, Victorio, an old warrior fighting one last battle not with weapons, but with desperate hope. Behind Victorio, the other warriors waited silently, and beyond them stretched the endless desert, where violence and survival had danced together for generations. He thought about the easy path, refusing, sending them away, going back to his simple life of cattle and fences. He thought about the army patrols that would come looking if anyone suspected he'd harbored Apache. He thought about the ranchers who already viewed anyone sympathetic to the Apache as traitors deserving of frontier justice. Then he thought about that burning wagon, about Desba's fierce dignity as she'd commanded him to save her, about the way she'd endured agony without a sound. He thought about Key's words, when you save life, there is always debt. If I do this, Cole said slowly, I need to know everything, every detail about where Desba was going, who she was meeting, who knew her route. I need names, places, anything that might point to the traitor. Victorio's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, approval perhaps, or relief. He spoke, and Key translated with barely contained emotion. He says you are man of honor. He says you will have all information we have. He says from this day forward, you are under protection of our people. Anyone who harms you, they answer to him. That protection might get me killed faster than anything else. A ghost of a smile crossed Victorio's face at Key's translation. His response, then you must be clever. Must look like ordinary ranch hand while you search for truth. This is why you are perfect. You already are ordinary ranch hand who nobody notices. Thanks, Cole muttered. Victorio stepped forward and extended his hand, a gesture borrowed from white culture but offered with complete sincerity. Cole took it, and the chief's grip was firm and calloused, the hand of a man who'd spent his life surviving impossible odds. Victorio spoke one final time, and Key's voice carried the weight of sacred vow. He says, may the spirits guide you. May your enemies underestimate you, and may you live to see the peace my mother dreams of. He says you are no longer alone in this. We are bound now, your fate and ours. Then Victoria released Cole's hand, turned, and mounted his horse in one smooth motion. He spoke to his warriors in Apache, and they immediately began to disperse, melting back into the desert landscape with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, only dust remained to show they'd been there at all, except for Key, who remained in the doorway supporting his mother. I stay with her until she can travel, Key said. 2 days, maybe 3. I teach you Apache words, teach you signs our people use, teach you how to contact us if you find something. Cole nodded slowly, still processing what he'd just agreed to. Where do I start? Indian agency in Silver Ridge. Man named Harlan Moss. He is agent who was supposed to meet my mother. He may be traitor, or he may be innocent man who can help. You must figure out which. Desba spoke from the doorway, and Key translated with a slight smile. She says, do not look so worried. She has seen your spirit. You are stronger than you know. I hope she's right, Cole said, because I have a feeling I'm going to need every bit of strength I can find. As the morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the cool night air, Cole stood in front of his modest cabin and contemplated how a simple act of decency had transformed into something far larger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. Somewhere in Silver Ridge, a traitor walked free, plotting murder and working to ensure that the cycle of violence continued, and now it was Cole Brennan's job to unmask them. He looked at Key and Desba. All right, let's get started. I have a lot to learn and not much time to learn it. Key nodded approvingly. Good, first lesson. In Apache, we say shikis for friend. You should remember this word. You may need it. As Cole repeated the unfamiliar syllables, he couldn't help but think that making friends with Apache might turn out to be the easy part. It was the enemies among his own people that worried him most. 2 days of intensive instruction from Key had left Cole's head spinning with information. He'd learned basic Apache phrases, hand signals used for covert communication, and the locations of 3 hidden camps where he could leave messages if needed. More importantly, Key had given him names, people who'd known about Desba's journey, people who had access to her route, people who stood to gain from her death now. As Copper carried him along the familiar trail toward Silver Ridge, Cole felt the weight of his new mission settling onto his shoulders like a physical burden. The town appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings and false-fronted stores clustered around a crossroads that had somehow convinced itself. It was the center of civilization. Silver Ridge had maybe 300 permanent residents, not counting the drifters, prospectors, and soldiers who passed through. It had sprung up 5 years ago when someone found silver in the nearby hills, not enough to make anyone rich, but enough to justify a mining operation. And where there were miners, merchants followed. Cole guided Copper down the main street, hyper-aware of every detail in a way he'd never been before. The hardware store where Old Man Peterson sold everything from nails to dynamite. The Silver Dollar Saloon, already doing steady business despite the early hour. The general store run by the widow Chen, who'd come west with the railroad workers and stayed when her husband died in a mine collapse. The sheriff's office, where Thomas Wade kept a lazy sort of order that involved ignoring most crimes unless they personally offended him. And at the far end of town, past the church and the schoolhouse, stood the Indian Agency, a squat building of adobe and wood that looked more like a fort than an office. Cole tied Copper to the rail outside the general store and went inside. Mrs. Chen looked up from her ledger, her weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "Mr. Brennan, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. I was beginning to think you'd died out there on your claim. Just been busy. Mrs. Chen, McKinnon's herd keeps me running." Cole browsed the shelves, picking up items he actually needed. Coffee, flour, ammunition. "Things have been quiet in town." "Quiet?" Mrs. Chen laughed, a dry sound like rustling paper. "Nothing quiet about Silver Ridge lately. You didn't hear about the Apache woman?" Cole's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice casual. What Apache woman? Found a burned wagon 2 days ago about 10 miles east of here. Army patrol came through looking for survivors, found nothing but ashes and some blood. They're saying it was an Apache woman traveling alone. Probably got attacked by bandits, or maybe got caught in her own fire, trying to camp careless. Mrs. Chen lowered her voice conspiratorially. But some folks think it was justice. Apache has been raiding ranches all summer. What goes around comes around, you know. Cole forced himself to nod thoughtfully, while his insides churned. The army knew, which meant someone had reported the wagon, probably saw the smoke, and investigated after Cole had already taken Desba away. Army still looking for survivors. Not really. Lieutenant Nash said if she was out there alive, she'd have shown up by now. Besides, they got bigger problems. More troop movements coming through, headed west. Talk is they're planning a major push against Victorio's band. This was new information, and troubling. When? Couple weeks, maybe a month. That's what I heard from the soldiers buying supplies. Mrs. Chen began tallying Cole's purchases. You be careful out there, Mr. Brennan. Territory's getting more dangerous by the day. Cole paid for his goods and stepped back outside, his mind racing. If the army was planning a major offensive, that put even more pressure on finding the traitor quickly. Once the shooting started in earnest, any chance for peace would evaporate. He loaded his supplies onto copper and then walked down the street toward the Indian agency, trying to look like a man with no particular purpose beyond mild curiosity. The building's door was open, and Cole could hear voices inside, one raised in anger, the other trying to maintain calm. He stepped through the doorway into a cramped office that smelled of old paper and tobacco. 2 men occupied the space. One sat behind a desk piled high with documents, a thin man in his 40s with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. The other stood in front of the desk, a large bearded rancher whose face was red with fury. "I don't care about your paperwork, Moss." The rancher was shouting. "Those Apache killed 3 of my cattle last week. 3! That's money out of my pocket. And what does the Indian agency do? Nothing. You sit here and talk about peace, while they steal from honest men." The man behind the desk, Harlan Moss, Cole realized, pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Garrett, I've told you before, I can't help you unless you have proof it was Apache and not simply coyotes or rustlers." "I know Apache sign when I see it. Tracks all over the place, heading north toward their camps." Garrett slammed his hand on the desk, making papers jump. "You're supposed to control these savages, keep them on the reservation. Instead, you protect them, make excuses for them. Makes a man wonder whose side you're on." "I'm on the side of preventing a massacre," Moss said quietly. "Which is what you'll get if the army comes in with all guns blazing. The Apache who are raiding, they're desperate, hungry, being pushed off their land. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. If we could just get authorization to increase their rations, increase their rations." Garrett's voice dripped with contempt. "Feed them better so they can raid us stronger. You're a fool, Moss, a dangerous fool." He turned and stormed toward the door, nearly bowling over Cole in the process. "Get out of my way, ranch hand!" Cole stepped aside, and Garrett barreled past him out into the street. In the sudden silence that followed, Moss looked up at Cole with tired eyes. "I'm sorry you had to witness that. Can I help you with something?" Cole removed his hat, the gesture of a simple man showing respect. "Name's Cole Brennan. I work the McKinnon Ranch, got a small claim east of here. I heard you were the Indian agent. Thought I'd introduce myself." Moss studied him for a moment, then gestured to a chair. "Sit, Mr. Brennan. Always happy to meet someone who doesn't immediately threaten to hang me." Cole sat, turning his hat in his hands. Up close, Harlan Moss looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from fighting a losing battle. His office was organized chaos, maps pinned to every wall, showing Apache territories, reservation boundaries, army patrol routes. On his desk sat a photograph of a woman and 2 children. "You have family in Silver Ridge?" Cole asked, nodding at the photograph. "Had. Past tense." Moss's expression went carefully neutral. "My wife and children died of influenza 3 years ago, back in St. Louis. That's why I took this position, needed to get away from memories. Thought I could do some good out here." He laughed bitterly. "Turned out the memories followed me, and the good I can do gets smaller every day. Seems like a difficult job. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. The Apache don't trust me because I'm white and work for the government that's destroying them. The white settlers don't trust me because I try to treat the Apache like human beings. The army thinks I'm naive, and Washington thinks I'm incompetent." Moss removed his spectacles and cleaned them on his shirt. "But somebody has to try to keep the peace, even when nobody wants it kept." Cole saw an opening. "I heard something about an Apache woman traveling alone. Wagon burned a couple days back." Moss's expression went carefully blank. "Oh, where did you hear that?" "Mrs. Chen at the general store. She said the army was looking for survivors. They won't find any." Moss stood and walked to his window, looking out at the street. "That woman, her name was Desba. She was coming here to meet with me. We'd been corresponding through intermediaries for months, trying to arrange a meeting between tribal leaders and government officials who actually want peace. She was supposed to arrive 3 days ago." Cole kept his expression neutral. "You think she's dead?" "I don't know what to think. The wagon was found burned, blood on the ground, but no body. Could mean she escaped. Could mean animals dragged her away. Could mean—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Could it mean what? Moss turned back to face Cole, and there was something haunted in his eyes. "Could mean someone made it look like an accident or an Apache mistake. Could mean someone didn't want her reaching me. Who would want that?" "Take your pick." Moss returned to his desk and sat down heavily. "Every rancher who wants Apache land. Every supplier who makes money from army contracts that would end if there's peace. Every politician who's built their career on the Indian threat. Every soldier who'd rather fight than negotiate." He paused. "Every Apache warrior who thinks peace talk is betrayal and would rather die fighting than live on a reservation." Cole leaned forward. "You really think someone would kill her deliberately?" "Mr. Brennan, 3 months ago, I arranged a meeting between an Apache peace chief named Noche and a territorial judge who was sympathetic to their cause. The night before the meeting, Noche was found dead, officially from bad whiskey. Except Noche didn't drink whiskey. Never had religious reasons." Moss's voice was quiet but intense. 2 months ago, a cavalry officer who'd been writing letters to Washington about army atrocities against Apache was transferred suddenly to a post in Montana. Last I heard, he died in a suspicious riding accident. You're saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying there are people who benefit from continued conflict, and those people have power, money, and no scruples about how they use either one." Moss pulled out a drawer and retrieved a bottle of whiskey, poured himself 2 fingers. "I document everything, Mr. Brennan. Every suspicious death, every convenient accident, every peace advocate who suddenly disappears. You know what Washington does with my reports? Nothing. Because the people I'm reporting on have friends in high places." Cole made a decision. If Moss was the traitor, he was the best actor Cole had ever seen. And if he wasn't, which Cole's instinct said he wasn't, then he was an ally worth having. What if Desba wasn't dead? Cole asked carefully. "What if she survived?" Moss looked at him sharply. "Why would you say that?" "Just a hypothetical. If she survived, and if she could identify who sabotaged her wagon, would that be enough evidence to do something? Do you know something, Mr. Brennan?" Cole held his gaze. "I'm asking if you'd want to know, if there was something to know." Understanding dawned slowly in Moss's eyes. He set down his whiskey glass very carefully. "Mr. Brennan, if you have information about Desba's whereabouts or condition, you need to understand the position that puts you in. Harboring Apache in the current climate could be considered treason. You could be arrested, tried, possibly hanged. That's not what I asked." Moss stood and walked to his office door, looked out to make sure no one was in earshot, then closed it. When he turned back to Cole, his entire demeanor had changed. Less exhausted bureaucrat, more focused investigator. "If Desba is alive," he said quietly, "then she's in imminent danger. Whoever tried to kill her will try again. And if certain people knew she survived, they'd send the army to wherever she's hiding, claim she's hostile, and finish the job legally. So telling the authorities is out. Telling anyone is dangerous. The network of people opposed to peace, they're everywhere. I trust maybe 3 people in this entire territory, and I only met you 10 minutes ago. Moss sat back down. But if you're asking whether I'd be willing to help, to work outside official channels to find who's behind this and stop them, then yes. God help me, yes. Cole studied the man's face, looking for any sign of deception. He saw only earnest desperation. The look of a man who'd watched too many good intentions turn to ash and was willing to take risks he probably shouldn't. I need names, Cole said. Everyone who knew about Desba's trip, everyone who had access to her route or timing. Moss hesitated only a moment before opening another drawer and pulling out a leather-bound journal. I kept records. Probably shouldn't have, but I did. He flipped through pages covered in neat handwriting. The meeting was arranged through a series of intermediaries. On the Apache side, only Desba, her son Key, and Chief Victorio knew the full details. On our side, he ran his finger down the page. Myself, obviously. Lieutenant Nash from Fort Benson. He's actually sympathetic to peace, helped arrange safe passage. Judge Henry Cornwall, who was going to mediate the discussions. And I mentioned it in passing to my assistant Timothy Grant, though I didn't give him specifics. That's it. Just 4 people on the white side. Those are the only ones I told directly. But information leaks. Grant could have mentioned it to someone. Nash might have discussed it with other officers. Cornwall has a secretary who handles his correspondence. Moss looked troubled. And then there are the people who might have figured it out on their own by watching patterns, following leads. Like who? Garrett, the man who was just in here yelling at me. He's been watching this office for months, following people who visit me. He's convinced I'm aiding the enemy, and he's not entirely wrong. Moss paused. Then there's Colonel Maxwell at Fort Benson. He's old guard military, believes the only good Indian is a dead Indian. He'd love to see peace talks fail so he can have his war. Anyone else? Marcus Sullivan runs the trading post. He supplies both the army and sometimes Apache through back channels. He makes money either way, but war is more profitable than peace. Moss added another name. And there's Francis Wade, the sheriff's brother. He owns half the grazing land between here and the fort, land he acquired after the previous Apache occupants mysteriously disappeared. Cole committed the names to memory. What does it mean? Who has access to the materials needed to sabotage a wagon wheel and set a delayed fire? Anyone with a saw and a can of oil? Which is basically everyone. Moss closed his journal. But it takes specific knowledge to cut a wheel hub, so it fails at the right moment. Whoever did this knew wagons, knew engineering, so we're looking for someone with mechanical knowledge, motive to prevent peace, and access to information about Desba's route. Cole stood. That's still too many people. What will you do? Listen, watch. Ask questions that sound innocent but aren't. Cole moved toward the door. I'll be in town for a few hours, maybe stay the night at the boarding house. If I learn anything useful, I'll come back. Moss stood as well. Mr. Brennan, Cole, be careful. Whoever's behind this, they've already proven they're willing to kill. They won't hesitate to add one more body to the count. I'll keep that in mind. Cole opened the door, then paused. One more thing. If something happens to me, if I disappear or turn up dead in some convenient accident, Desba is at my homestead. She's badly hurt but alive. Someone needs to get her to safety. Moss nodded slowly. I'll remember that. I hope I won't need to. Yeah, me too. Cole stepped out into the afternoon heat and walked back toward where Copper was tied. His conversation with Moss had given him leads, but also reinforced how dangerous this situation was. A conspiracy that reached into the army, local government, and business community wasn't something he could fight directly. He'd have to be subtle, careful, and probably lucky. He decided his next stop should be the Silver Dollar Saloon. Men talked freely when they were drinking, and Cole had always had a talent for fading into the background, becoming the kind of person nobody remembered seeing. The saloon was busier now, filled with miners finishing their shifts and cowboys spending their pay. Cole ordered a beer and found a spot at the bar where he could listen to the conversations around him. Most of it was the usual: complaints about work, boasts about women, arguments about card games. Then he heard Garrett's voice, loud and angry, coming from a table in the corner. The big rancher was holding court with several other men, and they were discussing the Apache problem. "Mark my words," Garrett was saying. "That wagon burning wasn't an accident. That was a message. Apache showing us they'll burn anyone who tries to negotiate with the government." One of the other men shook his head. "I heard it was bandits, or maybe just a cooking fire gone wrong. Bandits don't know Apache roots. And that woman, Desba, or whatever her name was, she wasn't cooking. She was carrying messages between Victorio and that bleeding heart moss at the agency." Garrett took a long drink. "A good riddance, I say. One less savage to worry about." "You think she's really dead?" another man asked. "Has to be. Nobody survives a fire like that, and if she crawled away wounded, the coyotes got her by now." Garrett's expression was satisfied. "Either way, those peace talks are finished. Army can do what needs doing without her stirring up sympathy for the Apache." Cole felt rage building in his chest, but forced it down. Getting angry would accomplish nothing except drawing attention. Instead, he listened as Garrett continued talking, bragging about how he'd been putting pressure on Moss, how he'd written to the territorial governor about the Indian agent's treasonous sympathies. But nothing in Garrett's words suggested he knew about the sabotage beforehand. He seemed genuinely pleased it had happened, but not like someone who'd orchestrated it. Cole finished his beer and moved to a different part of the saloon, where a group of soldiers from Fort Benson sat playing cards. He recognized one of them, a sergeant named Davies, who sometimes came by the McKinnon Ranch looking for horses. "Davies," Cole greeted him. "How's the army treating you?" Davies looked up and grinned. "Brennan, haven't seen you in months. Army's treating me like always, poorly paid and overworked. Have a seat. We're just killing time before we head back to the fort." Cole joined the table, and conversation flowed easily. He learned that Lieutenant Nash was well liked by his men, that Colonel Maxwell was planning something big, that tensions at the fort were running high. But he also learned something interesting. 3 days before Desba's wagon burned, a civilian had come through the fort asking questions about Apache movements and upcoming peace negotiations. "What kind of civilian?" Cole asked casually. "Don't know. I didn't see him myself, just heard about it. Jenkins said he was asking the colonel about security arrangements, claiming he was worried about his ranch." Davies laid down a card. "Why? You thinking about getting into the information business?" "Just curious. The territory's dangerous these days. Man likes to know what's happening." As the afternoon wore into evening, Cole made his rounds through Silver Ridge, talking to people, listening more than he spoke. He heard a dozen theories about the burned wagon, several complaints about Apache raids, and endless speculation about when the army would finally deal with Victorio's band permanently. But he also heard something else, a pattern emerging from the noise. Multiple people mentioned seeing a stranger in town over the past few weeks, a man nobody knew who asked a lot of questions about routes and schedules. A man who'd left town the morning before Desba's wagon burned. Cole filed that information away and decided it was time to visit one more place before dark, the trading post. Marcus Sullivan's establishment was part general store, part warehouse, part informal bank for anyone who didn't trust the one in town. Sullivan himself was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with shrewd eyes, and the kind of smile that never quite reached them. "Help you find something?" Sullivan asked as Cole browsed the shelves. "Just looking. Might need some supplies before winter comes." "Smart thinking. Prices go up when the snow starts." Sullivan leaned against his counter. "You work at the McKinnon place, don't you?" "That's right, a good outfit. McKinnon's fair, pays on time." Sullivan pulled out a pipe and began packing it with tobacco. "Hear anything interesting out at the ranch?" "Way out there. I imagine you see all kinds of things." Something in the man's tone put Cole on alert. The question seemed casual, but wasn't. "Just cattle mostly. Occasional coyote." "Why?" "No reason. Just like to keep informed about what's happening in the territory. Knowledge is currency in my line of work." Sullivan lit his pipe, clouds of smoke wreathing his head. "For instance, I heard the army's looking for an Apache woman. Wagon burned. Nobody found. Strikes me as odd. Odd how? Well, if you wanted to kill someone and make it look like an accident, burning them in a wagon would work. But leaving nobody? That suggests either she wasn't there when it burned, or someone moved her afterward. Sullivan's eyes never left Cole's face. Makes a man wonder if she survived, and if she did, where she might have gone. Cole kept his expression neutral. Seems like a lot of speculation. I deal in speculation. And observation. And I observed that you just spent an hour at the Indian agency, talking to Moss, then made the rounds of town, asking questions without seeming to ask questions. Sullivan smiled that empty smile. You're either very curious or very invested in something. Which is it? Cole realized he'd underestimated how closely people watched in a small town, just trying to understand the situation. Territory's getting more dangerous. Man needs to know which way the wind's blowing. Fair enough. Word of advice, though, some winds are better left alone. Poking around in certain matters gets people killed. Sullivan's tone remained friendly, but the warning was clear. You seem like a decent fellow, Brennan. Hate to see you end up in another mysterious accident. I'll keep that in mind. Cole left the trading post as the sun touched the western horizon, painting Silver Ridge in shades of red and gold that reminded him uncomfortably of fire. His day of investigation had given him leads, suspects, and warnings, but no clear answers. What he did know, someone had sabotaged Desba's wagon, probably someone connected to the web of interests that opposed peace. That someone might know she survived, and that someone would be watching for anyone asking too many questions. As Cole swung into Copper's saddle and headed back toward his homestead, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching him from the shadows of Silver Ridge. The hunt for the traitor had begun, but so had something else, the realization that he himself might now be the hunted. Cole rode through the darkness, his mind sorting through everything he'd learned in Silver Ridge. The moon was 3/4 full now, casting enough light to see the trail, but creating shadows that could hide anything. Every sound made him tense. The rustle of wind through sage, the distant howl of a coyote, the creak of his saddle leather. He was a mile from his homestead when Copper's ears suddenly pricked forward. The horse slowed without being asked, sensing something ahead. Cole's hand moved to his rifle, slowly drawing it from its scabbard. Then a figure stepped out from behind a rock formation. Key, his hand raised in the Apache sign for friend. Jesus, Cole breathed, lowering his rifle. You trying to get yourself shot? Trying to make sure you made it home alive. Key fell into step beside Copper. My mother said you would be cautious, but I wanted to be certain. This territory has ears everywhere, I noticed. Sullivan at the trading post practically accused me of hiding Desba. Key's expression darkened. Marcus Sullivan. Yes, we know this name. He sells guns to Apache warriors who want to fight, then sells information about those same warriors to the army. He profits from both sides of the war. That makes him a bastard, but does it make him the saboteur? Perhaps. Or perhaps he knows who is. They reached Cole's cabin, where a lamplight showed through the window. My mother is stronger today. She has been teaching me what to watch for in your investigation. She says the answer is usually simpler than it seems. Follow the money, follow the power. Inside the cabin, Desba sat propped up in bed, looking far better than she had 3 days ago. Her fever was gone. The color had returned to her face, and though her leg remained splintered and useless, she was clearly on the path to recovery. She spoke in Apache when Cole entered, and Key translated. She asks what you learned in Silver Ridge. Cole sat at his small table and recounted the day, his conversation with Moss, the suspects he'd identified, the mysterious stranger who'd been asking questions, Sullivan's warning. As he spoke, Desba listened intently, occasionally asking questions through Key. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and Key's translation carried weight. She says you did well, but you are looking in the wrong place. The man who cut her wagon wheel, she saw his hands. White hands, but with burns. Old burns, like someone who works with hot metal. And he wore a ring. Silver with a red stone. Cole felt electricity run through him. She saw him. When? Another exchange in Apache. 2 days before the fire, she stopped to water her horses at a creek. A white man was there, said his horse had thrown a shoe and he was walking to nearest town. They did not speak much. She knew little English then, and he seemed nervous around her. But she remembers his hands because he helped her lift a water bucket, and she saw the burns. Scars from working forge fires. A blacksmith, Cole said. Or someone who works metal. His mind raced. Silver Ridge has a blacksmith, Thomas Burke, but he's about 60 years old, barely leaves his shop. Doesn't seem the type to sabotage wagons in the middle of nowhere. There is more, Key said. She noticed his horse was not lame. It was standing fine, no thrown shoe. The man lied about why he was there. So he was following her or waiting for her. Cole stood and paced. He saw where she was going, maybe even tampered with her wagon while she was at the creek. But why lie about his profession? Why not just pretend to be a rancher or a drifter? Desba spoke again, her tone urgent. He translated, "She says because he did not expect her to survive. Did not expect anyone to ask questions about a dead Apache woman. He was careless because he thought it did not matter." Cole felt pieces clicking into place. A man who works with metal, who wears a silver ring with a red stone, who would sabotage a wagon. He stopped pacing. "I need to get back to Silver Ridge tomorrow. I need to look at hands, everyone's hands. Someone in that town has burned scars and a specific ring. It is dangerous," Key warned. "If he knows you are looking for him, he doesn't know I know anything specific. Right now I'm just a curious ranch hand asking general questions." Cole looked at Desba. "Tell her thank you. This gives me something concrete to search for," but Desba wasn't finished. She spoke at length, her expression grave, and Key's translation became increasingly concerned. "She says there is something else you must know. The man at the creek, he was not alone." When she looked back after riding away, she saw another figure on horseback, watching from a distance. Too far to see clearly, but the horse was distinctive. A palomino with white stockings. She remembers because it was a beautiful animal, unusual for this territory. A palomino with white stockings. Cole searched his memory of the horses he'd seen in Silver Ridge. Most were standard browns and bays, working animals chosen for endurance rather than looks. But he'd seen one palomino. His blood went cold. "Lieutenant Nash," he said slowly. "Nash rides a palomino with white stockings. I saw it tied outside the Silver Dollar when I was in town." Key and Desba exchanged a look. "The army officer?" Key said. "The one Moss said was sympathetic to peace?" "That's what Moss thinks. But what if he's not?" Cole's mind was racing now, connecting dots. What if Nash is playing both sides? He'd have access to information about Apache movements and peace negotiations. He'd know Desba's route because Moss trusted him with it. And if he's the traitor, having people think he supports peace would be perfect cover. But the other man, the one with burned hands, could be anyone Nash hired to do the actual sabotage. Someone with the skills, but not the connections. Cole grabbed his hat. "I'm riding to Moss's house tonight. He needs to know about this before Nash realizes we're onto him." "Too dangerous at night," Key protested. "Wait until morning. Morning might be too late. If Nash figures out Desba survived, he'll come looking. And he'll bring soldiers, make it legal." Cole checked his rifle, made sure his revolver was loaded. "I'll be careful. Stay with your mother, keep watch. If anyone comes, anyone at all, you hide her and disappear into the desert," Desba called out as Cole headed for the door. He turned back to see her watching him with those fierce, intelligent eyes. She spoke a single sentence, and Key translated with a slight smile. "She says you have a warrior's heart, even if you are a foolish white man who does not know when to be afraid. Tell her fear is what keeps you alive." "I'm plenty afraid," Cole smiled despite his tension. "I'm just doing it anyway." The ride back to Silver Ridge through the darkness was tense. Cole kept Copper at a steady pace, fast enough to make time, but slow enough to watch for ambush. The town was mostly dark when he arrived, just a few lights showing in windows and the constant glow from the saloon. Moss's house was on the edge of town, a small adobe structure that looked more sad than welcoming. Cole tied Copper in the shadows and approached on foot, watching for any signs of surveillance. The windows were dark, but when Cole knocked softly, the door opened almost immediately. Moss stood there, holding a lantern, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "Brennan, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk." Inside. Once the door was closed, Cole quickly explained what Desba had remembered. The man with burned hands and the ring, the Palomino watching from a distance. As he spoke, he watched Moss's face go from confused to horrified. "Nash?" Moss sat down heavily. "You're saying Lieutenant Nash is the traitor?" "Makes sense. He'd have access to everything. Troop movements, peace negotiations, Apache sympathizers. He could sabotage peace efforts while pretending to support them. Who would suspect him?" Moss rubbed his face with both hands. "But I've worked with him for months. He seemed genuinely committed to preventing bloodshed, or genuinely committed to keeping you thinking that while he worked against you." Cole leaned forward. "Think about it. Every peace initiative that's failed, every convenient accident. Did Nash have advanced knowledge of any of them?" Moss's expression grew increasingly troubled as he mentally reviewed past events. The meeting with Chief Noche that went wrong. Nash arranged the security. The cavalry officer who died in Montana, Nash recommended his transfer. And Desba's route? He looked up at Cole with dawning horror. "I told Nash the exact path she'd take, the timing, everything. I trusted him completely. Who else knows you trusted him? No one. I kept our communications confidential because I thought," Moss trailed off, "because I thought I was protecting a valuable ally. Instead, I was feeding information to the enemy." "We need proof," Cole said. "The burn scars and ring will help identify Nash's accomplice, but we need something that connects Nash directly to the sabotage. His office at the fort. He keeps records of everything, troop movements, patrol schedules, correspondence. If he's been coordinating with someone to sabotage peace efforts, there might be evidence. How do we get into his office without getting arrested or shot?" Moss thought for a moment. "Tomorrow night, there's a gathering at Colonel Maxwell's quarters. Officers and local dignitaries. Nash will be there. I'm invited, and I can bring a guest. While he's occupied, someone could search his office. That someone being me. It's incredibly risky. If you're caught, then I'm caught. But if we don't stop Nash, Desba dies, your peace negotiations die, and this whole territory goes up in flames." Cole stood. "Set it up. Tomorrow night." A sound outside made both men freeze, footsteps approaching the house. Moss quickly extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Cole drew his revolver, positioning himself beside the door. The footsteps stopped at the door. A pause, then a soft knock. "Mr. Moss?" A voice called, young, nervous. "It's Timothy Grant. I need to speak with you urgently." Moss and Cole exchanged a look. Grant was Moss's assistant at the Indian Agency. Moss cracked open the door. "Timothy, it's past midnight." "What's wrong?" Grant practically fell through the doorway, his face pale with fear. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know where else to go. Someone's been following me. I think they know I talked to you about something I shouldn't have." Moss lit the lantern again, keeping the light low. "What did you talk about?" "The stranger who was asking questions about Apache movements. You told me to report anything suspicious, so I did some asking around. I found out his name, Jacob Fisher. He's a civilian scout, works for whoever pays him. And I found out who hired him last month." Grant's hands were shaking. "Lieutenant Nash, sir." Nash hired Fisher to track Apache movements and report on peace negotiations. Cole and Moss shared a look. "Another piece falling into place. How did you discover this?" Moss asked. "Fisher drinks at the Silver Dollar. I bought him whiskey, said I might have work for a good scout. He got talkative, started bragging about his contracts. Said Lieutenant Nash pays better than most because he wants detailed reports, not just general information." Grant wiped sweat from his forehead. "I didn't think much of it until tonight, when someone came to my room at the boarding house asking questions about what I'd been investigating. I left through the window, came straight here. Did this person see you come here?" Cole asked sharply. "I don't think so. I was careful." But even as Grant said it, Cole heard horses outside, multiple horses, moving purposefully through the dark streets. He moved to the window and peered out through a gap in the curtain. 6 soldiers on horseback, led by a figure Cole recognized even in the darkness. "Lieutenant Nash, we've got company," Cole said quietly. "And they don't look friendly." Moss moved to see for himself, his face draining of color. "They're surrounding the house." Nash's voice called out, clear and commanding. "Harlan Moss, I know you're in there. Come out peacefully and we can discuss this like civilized men." Moss looked at Cole. "What do we do? How many exits does this house have?" "Two, front door and back window that leads to the alley. Then you and Grant go out the back, head to the church. Lots of witnesses there if Nash tries anything." Cole checked his ammunition. "I'll go out the front, give you time to run. They'll arrest you. Or worse, not if I don't give them a reason to." Cole moved toward the front door. "Tell Desba I'm sorry I couldn't finish what I started. Tell her to get well and keep fighting for peace." Before Moss could argue, Cole opened the door and stepped out into the street, his hands deliberately visible and empty. "Lieutenant Nash," he called out, "surprised to see an army riding through town in the middle of the night. Something urgent?" Nash sat his palomino with perfect military posture, but even in the dim light, Cole could see tension in his face. "Cole Brennan, the ranch hand who's been asking an awful lot of questions lately, man's entitled to be curious about his own territory. Curiosity becomes suspicion when it focuses on military operations and sensitive negotiations." Nash dismounted slowly, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "I've been hearing interesting things about you, Brennan. About where you've been, who you've been talking to. I talk to lots of people. Part of being friendly. Do you also hide Apache fugitives as part of being friendly?" Nash's voice went cold. "We know you pulled someone from that burning wagon. We know you've been harboring an Apache woman, Desba, daughter of Victorio. That's aiding the enemy during wartime, Brennan. That's treason." Cole kept his expression neutral despite his racing heart. "That's quite an accusation. Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that Marcus Sullivan saw you acting suspiciously, based on your sudden interest in peace negotiations and Indian affairs. Based on the fact that you're here, in the middle of the night, talking to the one Indian agent who's been obstructing military operations." Nash took a step closer. "Where is she, Brennan? Where is who? Don't play stupid, Desba. Where are you hiding her?" Behind Nash, Cole saw movement in an upstairs window across the street, Moss and Grant making their escape. He needed to keep Nash's attention a few seconds longer. "Let me ask you something, Lieutenant. If I had pulled someone from a burning wagon, which I'm not saying I did, wouldn't the decent thing be to help them? Isn't that what civilized men do? Civilized men don't aid savages who've been raiding settlements and killing innocent people. And what about civilized men who sabotage peace negotiations, who hire scouts to track peaceful envoys and arrange accidents?" Cole saw Nash's expression flicker just for a moment, but enough. "What do we call men like that?" Nash's hand tightened on his gun. "Careful, ranch hand. You're already in enough trouble without adding slander against a military officer. Is it slander if it's true? Because I've got a witness who saw you watching while your hired man sabotaged Desba's wagon. I've got testimony about Jacob Fisher and his contracts with you. I've got enough to prove you've been working against peace while pretending to support it. You've got nothing but the word of a savage and your own imagination." But Nash's voice had an edge now, the tone of a man whose carefully laid plans were unraveling. "Even if anyone believed you, which they won't, you're in no position to make accusations. You're under arrest for treason. On whose authority? Mine and Colonel Maxwell's. We've been authorized to detain anyone suspected of aiding hostile Apache." Nash signaled his soldiers. "Take him." Two soldiers dismounted and approached Cole. He didn't resist as they grabbed his arms, knowing that fighting would only end badly. But as they pulled him toward the horses, he saw something that made him smile despite his situation. Walking down the street, lanterns in hand, came a group of townspeople, Mrs. Chen, Sheriff Wade, Judge Cornwall, and at least a dozen others. Behind them came Moss and Grant, and with them was someone Cole hadn't expected to see, Colonel Maxwell himself, looking deeply unhappy. "Lieutenant Nash!" Maxwell's voice boomed across the street. "What in God's name is going on here?" Nash straightened. "Sir, I was just arresting this man for aiding a hostile Apache in the middle of the night, without consulting me, without a warrant." Maxwell's face was red with anger. "And why are half the townspeople gathered in the street, telling me you were about to commit murder?" "Murder? Sir, I would never—" "Mr. Moss has made some very serious allegations, Lieutenant. Allegations about your involvement in sabotaging peace negotiations. Allegations supported by this young man, Grant, who apparently has documented evidence of your communications with a civilian scout." Maxwell's eyes were hard. "I want your sidearm, Lieutenant, now!" Nash's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, calculation. For a moment, Cole thought he might actually draw his weapon and start shooting. But years of military discipline held. He unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to Maxwell. "This is a misunderstanding, sir. I can explain. You'll have plenty of opportunity to explain." In front of a military tribunal, Maxwell turned to the soldiers holding Cole. "Release him. Mr. Brennan is not under arrest." As the soldiers let him go, Cole saw Nash's expression transform into something ugly and desperate. "You don't understand," Nash said, his voice rising. "I was trying to save lives. Every peace negotiation fails. They always fail. The Apache can't be trusted, can't be negotiated with. Better to end it quickly through military action than drag it out with false hope. So you took it upon yourself to ensure the negotiations would fail." Moss stepped forward, his anger barely controlled. "How many people died because of your interference, Nash? How many chances for peace did you destroy? They weren't real chances. They were fantasies. Apache like Victorio will never accept reservation life. They'll fight until they're all dead, and they'll take our people with them." Nash's voice cracked. "I've seen what they do. I've buried men who were tortured to death, women and children who were—" "So you became like them," Judge Cornwall said quietly. "You became the thing you hated. You murdered and sabotaged in the name of saving lives." Nash fell silent, the fight draining out of him. Cole saw the moment he realized it was over, that his careful plans, his double life, his conviction that he was doing the right thing, had all come crashing down. "Jacob Fisher," Cole said. "The man you hired to sabotage Desba's wagon. Where is he?" Nash looked at Cole with hollow eyes. "I don't know. I paid him to do a job. He did it. I haven't seen him since." "Describe him." "Tall, thin, brown hair. Works as a blacksmith sometimes, scout other times. Has burn scars on both hands from forge work. Wears a silver ring with a red stone. His father's, I think." Nash's voice was mechanical now, defeated. "I met him in Tucson 6 months ago. He needed money. I needed someone who could do work I couldn't be connected to. He suggested the wagon accident. Said it would look like Apache carelessness or bandit attack. And the Palomino—" "Your horse? Why risk being seen?" "I didn't intend to be. I was watching from what I thought was a safe distance, making sure Fisher followed through. I didn't know the Apache woman would notice." Nash laughed bitterly. "So much for superior observation skills. A woman I tried to kill saw me clearly enough to identify my horse." Colonel Maxwell looked sickened. "Take him to the stockade. Double guard. And someone find this Jacob Fisher before he disappears completely." As soldiers led Nash away, the gathered crowd began to disperse, talking in hushed, shocked tones. Maxwell approached Cole. "Mr. Brennan, I owe you an apology, and an explanation of how one of my officers could operate right under my nose without my knowledge. Respectfully, Colonel, I don't need apologies or explanations. I just need to know, where does this leave the peace negotiations?" Maxwell looked at Moss, then back to Cole. "That's not my decision alone. But I can tell you I've lost my appetite for pointless bloodshed. If Chief Victorio is willing to talk in good faith, I'm willing to listen." He paused. "And if the woman Desba survived and is willing to continue her work, she'll have military protection this time." "Real protection." Cole felt relief wash over him. "I think she'll be willing. She's stubborn that way." As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Cole rode back to his homestead, exhausted but lighter than he'd felt in days. The truth was out. Nash was captured. The conspiracy was broken, at least this part of it. When he arrived, he found Key standing watch outside the cabin, rifle ready. The young warrior's face broke into a rare smile when he saw Cole. "You are alive. My mother said you would be, but I worried. Your mother was right." "She usually is." Cole dismounted, his body aching from the long night. "Nash is arrested, his hired man is being hunted, and the colonel is ready to resume peace talks. Your mother can finish what she started." Inside the cabin, Desba was awake and sitting up. When Key translated Cole's news, her face showed emotions that needed no translation: relief, satisfaction, and something that might have been vindication. She spoke at length, and Key translated with visible emotion. "She says you have done impossible thing. You have given her people a chance at survival. She says debt between you and her family is now beyond calculation. You saved her life, then you saved her life's work. She says you will always have home among our people, always have protection and friendship. She says you are proof that white men and Apache can trust each other, can work together. This is the foundation peace is built on." Cole felt overwhelmed by the weight of her words. "Tell her I just did what needed doing." "Anyone would have—" "No," Key interrupted. "Not anyone. Most men would have let her burn. Most would have turned away from impossible request. Most would have protected themselves instead of seeking truth." He placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "You are not most men." Over the next 2 weeks, as Desba healed and Jacob Fisher was captured trying to flee to Mexico, Silver Ridge transformed. Moss arranged new peace talks, this time with genuine military support. Victorio agreed to meet with Colonel Maxwell and territorial officials. Small steps, careful negotiations, but real progress. Cole Brennan returned to his simple life of working cattle and tending his modest claim. But he wasn't quite the same man who'd pulled a dying woman from a burning wagon. He'd seen the complexity of the conflict between Apache and whites, seen that people on both sides were desperate for peace, and seen that sometimes one person's choice to do the right thing could change everything. In the morning, Desba was well enough to travel. Victorio returned with his warriors. This time, there was no tension, no fear. The chief embraced his daughter with tears in his eyes, then turned to Cole. Through Key's translation, he spoke. "I asked for an impossible thing, and you did it. I asked you to risk everything, and you did not hesitate. You have given my people hope when we had none. You have shown that honor exists even in times of dishonor." Victorio removed a leather cord from around his neck, on which hung a small silver medallion. "This belonged to my father, who wore it in battle against Spanish soldiers. It is a symbol of courage and integrity. I give it to you now because you have shown both." Cole accepted the medallion with shaking hands. "I don't know what to say. Say you will remember. When others tell stories of Apache wars, of savagery and violence, you will remember that there were also people who fought for peace, people who chose trust over hatred." Victorio placed his hand over his heart. "You will remember. I'll remember." As Desba mounted her horse with Key's help, she looked down at Cole one last time. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything: gratitude, respect, and the fierce hope that maybe, just maybe, her dreams of peace weren't impossible after all. Cole watched them ride east into the rising sun. A small group of Apache returning to their people with news that a white man had proven trustworthy, that peace talks would resume, that perhaps survival with honor was still possible. 3 months later, a treaty was signed. It wasn't perfect, no treaty ever was, but it prevented the forced relocation to San Carlos, preserved some Apache lands, and most importantly, it saved lives on both sides. And in a small cabin on the edge of the Arizona Territory, a cowboy named Cole Brennan lived quietly, going about his work, helping his neighbors, and occasionally looking at the silver medallion he wore beneath his shirt. Some people thought he was just a simple ranch hand who'd gotten lucky. Others whispered he was something more, a peacemaker, a bridge between two worlds. Cole himself figured he was just a man who'd made a choice to pull a dying woman from a fire instead of riding away. Everything that followed, all the danger and fear and ultimate triumph, had flowed from that one moment of basic human decency. He'd learned something important. Impossible requests only stayed impossible until someone was brave enough to try. And sometimes saving one life meant saving hundreds more. The desert wind blew across his small homestead, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere out there, Desma was continuing her work. Key was growing into leadership, and Victoria was teaching his people that survival sometimes required trusting your enemies to become friends. And Cole Brennan, the cowboy who'd saved a giant Apache woman from fire and accepted an impossible request, knew he'd done something that mattered, something that would echo long after he was gone. He'd chosen honor over fear. And in the Arizona Territory of 1883, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.